Hi everyone, I'm Setayesh, and this is the fifth episode of the series Literary Schools in 15 Minutes. Today we're going to talk about an influential literary and cultural movement of the 20th century, Modernism. This movement spanned roughly from 1900 to 1945 and transformed literature, all of the arts, and even spilled into politics and philosophy. So, what exactly is modernism? Modernism designates a broad literary and cultural movement that spanned all of the arts. Like Romanticism, modernism was highly varied in its manifestations between the arts and even within each art. The modernist writer Virginia Woolf wrote a famous quote in 1924. It goes like this. Quote, on or about December 1910, human nature changed. End quote. She also explained that when human relations shift, there is simultaneously a change in religion, conduct, politics, and literature. While her pinpointing of a specific date was intentionally provocative, almost anyone who looks at the evolution of Western culture must note a distinct change in thought, behavior, and cultural production, which began sometimes in the late 19th century and coming to fruition around the Second World War. So, where did it start? Modernist art initially began in Europe's capitals, primarily Paris, but also in London, Milan, Berlin, and St. Petersburg. After the First World War, it also spread to cities in the United States and South America. And by the 1940s, modernism had thoroughly taken over the American and European academy. Modernism's roots lie in two key areas. The first one, the rapidly changing technology of the late 19th century. Between 1860 and 1940, the world changed in ways previously unimaginable. In 1860, traveling a mile a minute was a dream. Flight was a fantasy, and voices transmitted without wires was preposterous. But by 1940, people traveled at over 100 miles per hour. They could fly and they could have real time conversations across the Atlantic. So it was pretty crazy for people. And the second reason, the revolutionary theories of late 19th century thinkers. Karl Marx demonstrated that social class was created, not inherent. Freud reduced human individuality to just instinctive drives. Darwin provided fossil evidence challenging scripture based estimates of Earth's age. And Nietzsche said that even the most deeply held ethical principles were simply constructions. Together, these thinkers determined many of society's certainties. Modernist writers attempted to come to terms with where humanity stood after its cornerstone had been pulverized. They sifted through the shards of the past, looking for what was valuable and what could inspire the construction of a new society. Now, let's explore some of the central themes of modernism, and I'm going to start with Freud. Modernist novelists had no more important influence than Sigmund Freud. He proposed a three-part model of the psyche: the id, which represents primitive drives, the ego, which is the sense of self, and the superego, which comprises moral lessons and codes of behavior. Writers like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce turned this idea into the basis for fiction. They reacted against realist writers who sought to just record unadorned facts, simple recording. The modernists believed that is impossible. The psyche of the narrator will always be affected by unknown forces. Instead, writers, actually modernist writers, attempted to record thoughts instead of realities. They recorded thoughts. This became known as the stream of consciousness technique. Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man records thoughts from childhood to college. Woolf's The Mark on the Wall follows a woman's subconscious connections as she looks at a mark on the wall. Now, another central theme is the city. In The Wasteland, Eliot describes London as an unreal city. Modernism was the first literary movement to take urban life as a given. The anonymity of the city, its darkness, its mechanization, these factors all inspired and repelled modernists equally. The city became the master trope of modernism in itself. Although Joyce couldn't stay in Dublin, he was Irish, everything he wrote was about its vibrant urban life. Hart Crane composed his epic poem, The Bridge, about the Brooklyn Bridge. The city where technology and masses of people come together became the symbol of the modern condition. If the city is the master image of modernism, alienation is its master theme. Almost all modernist writing deals with alienation in some form. Alienation is the sense of not belonging to one's own milieu. The primary kind of alienation modernism depicts is the alienation of one sensitive person from the world or the society. The stream of consciousness technique is particularly well suited for this because readers can see the inner feelings of a person and witness their essential self and how they differ internally and externally. Stephen Dedalus is Joyce's protagonist, is alienated from his family, friends, religion, and country. Woolf's heroines are doubly alienated because of their status as women. Eliot's narrators are confronted by a world of broken shards, and for Ezra Pound, it is the world itself that has been alienated by greed. Another key theme is the presence of the past. Surrounded by the debris of smashed certainties, modernist writers looked at the contemporary world as a directionless place. Illusion, or brief references to people, places, things, and literature, was the characteristic modernist technique for including history in literary works or arts. Ezra Pound called his cantos a poem including history. The list of allusions in Ezra Pound's cantos has over 10,000 entries. Joyce's Stephen Dedalus says, quote, "History is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake." End quote. Yet both writers' works are filled with allusions to the past. Almost all modernist writers incorporate the belief that the past exists in the present. Nobody can run from the past. Now let's turn to the stylistic innovations of modernism. Modernism sought to accurately portray the world not as it was, but as humans actually experienced it. While in fiction, modernists relied on the stream of consciousness technique. This records thoughts as they pass through a narrator's head. The unpredictable connections people make between ideas demonstrate something about them, as do the things they try to avoid thinking about. In Ulysses, Leopold Bloom attempts not to dwell on his knowledge that his wife will cheat on him. Thoughts of his wife, of her lover, of sex make him veer in another mental direction. Small ideas and images recur without a apparent pattern and get stuck in his head. Just as a song might resonate through your mind and then disappear. This technique attempts to record how scattered and jumbled the experience of the world really is. That humans are alienated from true knowledge of themselves is the implicit connection, actual contention of the stream of consciousness form. In poetry, though, modernists like Pound and Eliot modeled the fragmented nature of minds and civilization. Eliot's The Wasteland has dozens of speakers that succeed each other without warning. The effect is a cacophony of voices, a mass of talking, devoid of any connection. In Pound's cantos and Williams Patterson, the poet speaks in many voices. Historical figures speak, artworks speak, ordinary people speak, everyone speaks. Everyone and everything actually speaks. And in these works, the poet becomes a compiler of voices. The arrangement of pieces is what matters, not the content of each individual piece. Now, let me explain what illusion is and why it matters so much in modernism. An illusion is a brief reference to a person, place, thing, idea, or a language that is not actually present. Because of modernist theories about the omnipresence of the past, illusions are difficult to avoid in modernist literature. In Joyce, Eliot, and Pound, the three leaders of the modernist movement in England, illusion was maybe the central formal device. Scholars have compiled long volumes just explaining each reference in Ulysses and the cantos. And remember, some of these illusions are personal, so nobody has understood them, could figure out what they refer to this day. Some illusions are quite clear. Pound's quote, Troy, but a heap of smoldering boundary stones, end quote, refers to Homer's Iliad. That's pretty clear. But not all are so clear. Pound's quote, These fragments you have shelved, end quote, alludes to Eliot's quote, These fragments I have shored against my ruins, end quote. So they have also alluded to other artists or literary figures, contemporary literary figures in their works. As I said, some of the illusions are just personal about their own, about the writer's, the poet's own life. So they're pretty hard to figure out. Many of Pound's illusions are frankly inaccessible. He spends a number of cantos alluding to Sigismondo Malatesta, an obscure Renaissance Italian warrior prince. Only because Pound made him famous does anyone recognize his name now. Joyce structured Ulysses to work on multiple levels. Mundane events correspond to Homer's Odyssey, but the book also works as a retelling of Irish history, the growth of the human fetus, and the history of the Catholic Church. Eliot's The Wasteland can be read simply as a collection of fragments. Appearing in the poem are the Greek seer Tiresias, working class women in East London, Hindu deities, Dante, and an American ragtime singer. These references are not at all explained, they just appear, and the reader or the critic has to figure them out. In the critical re-evaluation of modernism during the 1990s, one central question was whether one must understand all illusions to genuinely appreciate the work. Well, that was all for today. There is a lot to say about modernism, but it's just about enough for today, I think. We have covered the origin, the themes, and styles in this episode, and we'll cover the rest of the movement in the next episode, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.